for joining us for this episode of All About PR. I'm your host, Tarunjit Ratan. If you are tuning in for the first time, on this podcast, we speak to experts from the world of PR and communication from across the world and bring you interesting conversations from it. Today, we discuss a very interesting subject. The PR industry has a place for everyone with different talent sets. We don't discriminate. At least we like to think so. We do consider ourselves culturally diverse and inclusive. Yet, can there be more? The PR industry has lately been abuzz with chatter about diversity and inclusion. So, did it already exist or was that all in our minds? If yes, then what has been the progression and how is it faring now? How will it help make the industry a better place? In this episode of All About PR, we speak to Preeti Binoy. Preeti heads the corporate communication and government affairs function at Kimberly-Clark India and is also an inclusion and diversity executive council member. Passionate about creating a more balanced world, Preeti embeds diversity and inclusion in everything she does. So let's speak to her today and get to know more about the subject. Hi, Preeti. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tarun. Thank you so much for having me, and it's an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely, the pleasure is all mine. So before we get started on the subject, I would love it if you could share with our listeners how you got into PR.
Oh, that exciting thing to do, and will take me back in time as well, Tarun. So I'll just briefly touch upon the girl that I was and what I was aspiring to be. But I would now say, fortunately, it took me to public relations as an industry and career. So, like every girl growing up in the 90s, I also aspired to becoming an air hostess and was really working hard towards it. I majored and actually did my graduation in geography, which actually entitled me to finish 6 papers of geography across various gamuts. And the reason was to actually know geography as a subject well, know the maps, locations, which also would help me progress in my career as an air hostess. But little did I know that post my graduation, I got into doing my mass communication. And that's when my love for public relations really came to life. It just changed my world because I actually saw myself growing up to be a PR person. And that's when I think after my studies and after my post grad at KC College, it really took me on to actually picking up this role at a very known and famous agency called FCB Ulka, which now is called FCB Food Cone and Welding. And at that point of time, I still remember they were just setting up a small PR agency within the FCB Ulka gamut and was also run by my ex boss. Her name is Anita Gopral, a great visionary. And I still remember my first day of getting interviewed by her. And she said, "Welcome to the world of PR. It's a new learning for us as an agency as well." And I think that was the time when I said that, yes, realize that my calling and my love is for public relations. I want to ensure that I just deep dive into it, understand the industry a little bit more, and see where it takes me further. So that's where my first big break with public relations happened with the agency called FCB.
Awesome. And how has the journey been for you so far?
I'll possibly say it was an absolute roller coaster, Tarun. I didn't realize that I almost finished 22 years running on my 23rd year in my career. I still think I'm learning, evolving, but there were so many highs that they somehow just overshadow all the lows that possibly were there. And I just take them with a pinch of salt to say that they were learning experiences, which have really made me strong. And I think have also ensured that I get a very strong foothold in the industry and am able to also mentor a lot of young kids around from the various variety of clients that I had, which I think were always aspirations for many of us growing in PR at that point of time to be able to manage the launch of credit cards for, say, a client like HDFC Bank, to I still remember launching one of the hair colors for L'Oreal called Majorel with one of their brand ambassadors, Malaika Arora. So even doing healthcare at that point of time in such a nascent time in my career, which was for Just Lock Hospital. So I think the opportunity to work across diverse clients, and then yes, when you start growing in your career, to be able to handle the biggest mandate business company that this country saw and is seeing, the Tata Group, I think that just kept enhancing my career learning and experience. Crisis communications also now has become a part of me, which I really enjoy. I really hope that none of my company or any of our clients in the future have to go through it. But I think that is one aspect that I would really say, Tarun, that has become a very integral part of me, because I think crisis communications for every PR professional really gives you that enhanced learning. And that's what really makes you a strong thinker, a strong executor, and also a strong leader. So I think these are some of the real big highs that I saw, apart from the diversity of clients, but also I think the diversity of my leaders that came to the forefront and who helped nurture and grow me. That's something that I'll always take with me.
Absolutely. And like they rightly say, a smooth sea doesn't make a very effective sailor, right? So for all of us out
Absolutely.
there, don't shy away from crises. These are the times that, these are all opportunities that are disguised as crisis. Turn it
Absolutely, Tarun. In fact, I would say, within that real crazy heavy storm, those big waves that really come and just hit you splash and possibly even, hit your ears to kind of create that ripple effect are the ones that really leave a mark on you, because those are learnings that then make you an even more stronger and an even more capable leader to be able to think and navigate within the situations.
Absolutely. So, you've had a very exciting journey, a very interesting start, and a very exciting journey, I must say, in your entire almost 2 decades of your career. What still keeps you here?
That's an absolutely interesting question, Tarun, and especially for, I'm sure, people like you and me who've seen different facets of the PR industry grow, change, and evolve, right? I would say what really keeps me in the PR industry is the ever increasing evolution. I won't say change. There are lot of standard practices that I've seen when I started my career, which still prevail and which I think are absolutely important and should not change. But the kind of change that we see, and I think a lot of PR professionals like me would agree to this, is that the scope for public relations has evolved and is changing, right? And that possibly is giving traditional PR professionals like me to stay back in the industry, hone our own skills, and yet bring unique creative communications thinking to the forefront. That helps us also elevate our knowledge. And I think that's one great thing that's really been persistent over the past couple of years and has ensured that I really stay ground within this industry and really not get deterred to move out of this industry. Because I've seen myself grow over the years. I've evolved as a PR professional from media relations to, even looking at newer forms of communication. Today, digital has become the forefront. And the way we communicators, if I can say, play around with content on digital has been fantastic, right? And it has become not agnostic to a specific sector, but across segments. So I think that is definitely one evolution that possibly keeps me grounded and still has me stuck with a lot of interest to keep learning in this industry.
Absolutely. I think the best professionals in the industry are learners for life. And with the communication industry changing yet again, it's given us an opportunity to learn even more.
True, absolutely, absolutely. And like they say, right, and which you usually pointed out, you can never stop learning because they say, like life teaches you its lessons. I think our business careers also every day teach us a new lesson. With the multiple clients that we work with the multiple corporations we work with, right? They teach us lessons that possibly life may not teach us, but have an overlap from that. So I'm really excited and happy at the journey that I've covered so far, and I'm going to continue to keep learning in the same industry till I think another couple of years that I have for retirement.
I hope they are much more than a couple of years. You're a fantastic professional to have in the industry.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you so much.
So let's talk about diversity and inclusion in the PR industry. Talk to me about that. What does it mean? First, let's define it for our audience. See it progressing over the last 2 decades.
Very interesting and phenomenal topic that possibly, Tarun, you try to touch upon. And I think not only in the PR industry, we are seeing the term of diversity and inclusion being called out across industries, right? Today, the corporate world is also seeing a huge shift and growth that is happening. But when we come back to diversity and inclusion, does it really just signify the percentage of males versus females that you have in an organization? Or it is about also empowering both the sexes, right? I would not say that, yes, you need to have organizations that are more focused or dilute their energies on only women empowerment roles being a woman. But yes, there definitely needs to be a lot of coherence. We're seeing diversity and inclusion really evolve. And the reason I said across sectors, across corporations is we can possibly start it the other way around, Tarun, if I may. And I think diversity and inclusion starts from even our personal lives, right? As parents, how are we using the term diversity and inclusion? Because as parents, I think the first biggest step is parenthood. And if we look at parenthood to be only a woman's piece of cake, I don't think the word or the term parenthood would ever exist, right? The term itself has diversity and inclusion within it. Parenthood means the role of a father and a mother, right?
Right.
Similarly, I would say that when we talk of diversity and inclusion in the corporate world or in the industry, right, it needs to be for both the genders. Why? Because when we talk of diversity and inclusion in a workplace, we are technically trying to say that we want to define a work culture where men and women both can thrive. You
Correct.
are not differentiating between the caliber that a male colleague would have versus a woman colleague. You are not differentiating within the caliber that a male colleague could enjoy as a leadership role rather than a woman colleague. And I think in order to break this monotony, the PR industry has been a great example, Tarun, and also has the corporate world. Name it like Indra Nui from PepsiCo to even a lot of PR leaders. And I'd like to throw on some women leaders who have been some great examples in India for us. Prema Sagar, Valerie Pinto, Dipshika for that matter. Why go beyond? My own first boss, Anita Gokral, all women leaders, right? And they've gone out to showcase and to open up to the world that this industry is just not about women being in PR, but women being on leadership roles in PR, right? And
Interesting.
that's where, if you see today, no matter where you talk or how you speak, supposedly said in a, if I can say in a little cliche manner, that PR is a woman's industry. It might be a woman's industry where you have a lot of women wanting to take up these roles, but at the
Correct.
same time, I see a lot of male colleagues actually making it big within the industry. So for me, I would technically just want to sum it up to say, Tarun, that diversity and inclusion is a very important integral part for us in the PR industry to think through, deep dive, and also see where there are a lot of growth spots available for both the segments, your male colleagues or even your women colleagues, right? To be able to thrive and get on to bigger leadership roles.
So, while there are a lot of challenges that the PR industry or the communication industry as a whole has to address, how did you zero in on diversity and inclusion as a subject to focus upon?
So while Tarun, there is an important aspect on diversity and inclusion for us to touch upon in the PR industry. I think
Okay.
while we look at a lot of leadership roles that prevail in the PR industry, I think there are very less opportunities for young budding PR professionals to thrive. And the reason I say that is because we've been seeing that, there are not many mentoring opportunities for women leaders. Unfortunately, what happens is also we are so stuck and biased by the fact that when there is a woman colleague who say possibly may take a break to have a baby and start a family or even get married, there are a lot of biases that follow, right? And there is very little scope and opportunities that are possibly given to women in PR post these breaks they take. And I think there needs a lot of work to be done around that segment. And hence, I think it's critical and important that we look at ensuring that our diversity perspective changes from that manner.
Absolutely. So was there a moment in, in time, was there a moment in your life where you looked at this entire challenges that we face and say, okay, this is what I'm going to champion?
Going back in my personal career, Tarun, and like I just mentioned, right, I started my career with a woman leader. I grew and nurtured my professional career under her leadership for almost 4 years. That's where I saw a huge opportunity. But as I started to grow in my career, I started to work across organizations which were very centric towards male employees. And there was
Right.
very little room, very little scope for women to actually thrive. My own personal experience, I got married, I had a baby. It was a
Right.
struggle for me to come back because every organization that I went to for an interview post my childbirth actually asked me just one question. Oh, you've been on a break for almost a year. How are you going to catch up?
Really?
That seemed, yes. And that seemed to become the biggest question that every organization asked. And I just sat back thinking that if that's going to be the biggest challenge that they see, if that's going to be the biggest barrier, how are they even going to be open to an opportunity? And trust you me, that's when I think ad factors happened to me. And I give Madan sir a lot of credit to this. I have immense respect for him. He
Okay.
was the man who, in my interview, never asked me a single question about my maternal break or about how I would catch up with the PR industry after a 1 year break. All that he asked me was my interest and if in my career and in my journey moving forward, I was open to learning the new side of public relations or the new aspect in public relations, which is called investor relations. He was the man who hired me over an
Hmm.
interview over an evening without
Mhm.
any questions on my break, but on my capabilities, my learning, and what I could bring to the forefront to the industry. I give him a lot of credit for also the understanding and learning I have been able to hone on investor relations. So I think that's where a lot of thinking really needs to move because the gentleman not only ensure that he hire a woman colleague, get her to thrive in her career, give her that second homecoming, at the same time give her a new opportunity to upskill, right? And I think there are very few leaders who really give women those chances. So I would really say that that was a very big turning moment for me in my career.
And we need more such champions. And I'm glad that you've decided to join that tribe.
Absolutely. And it was a fantastic 3 years experience over there. I think a lot of learning, unlearning that also happened after the 1 year break that I had. Because, like I said earlier, right, Tarun, I saw that the PR industry was evolving, not changing, but evolving. And that evolution was a welcome learning for me as well.
Absolutely. So, when we touch upon the subject of diversity and inclusion, where do you see the entire industry? How do you see the entire industry evolving? And maybe 10 years down the line, what is your vision? How would you like to see the industry change?
I think it's a very tricky one, Tarun. And the reason I say it's a tricky one because I think it's not only for the PR industry, but I think for a lot of careers that currently prevail, right? We're seeing a lot of shift happening. I won't say that there's no evolution happening. As a women leader, there's more growth happening for us. Like I said earlier, I think what really is needed is a lot of mentoring for women leaders and mentoring from the perspective of how they can actually ensure that the gaps that prevail within their personal lives don't become hindrance. And I think the most important aspect for me that I would possibly want to bring a change was working closely with HR leaders or organizations that can institutionalize a change, bring in policies which are more flexible, especially for women PR professionals that they can thrive on. We're seeing such fantastic abundance talent in the industry currently. Unfortunately, we also see that, because of the current prevailing conditions, and no strong policies in place, a lot of that young talent actually has to drop off and put a pause to their career. And that's really very heartening to see. So that's definitely one change that I would love to make and like to make. And hence, as an individual, I ensure that I am imbibing diversity and inclusion not only at my workplace, but I'm also able to contribute by participating and enrolling myself at multiple forums, which possibly can become a platform for me to share my voice.
Brilliant. So, that brings me to my next question. Can you share, let's say, one instance of your personal involvement in creating a balanced workforce in your workplace?
Definitely. And this goes back to my agency days. It's been a fantastic journey these 2 decades, right? And the kind of diverse teams that we've really had. But it was the other way around with Tarun, if I may say. I had a fantastic team in one of my PR agencies in my stint, right? And in fact, it was an all girls team, an all girls team servicing a client side which had maximum male colleagues. I realized that though it was a robust, fantastic, strong workforce with all women colleagues, some great thinkers, I really wanted to ensure that we champion the cause of diversity, not by just adding another gender to possibly the team, but also trying and seeing how we could diversify with the thinking, right? Because I am a strong believer that diversity and inclusion is not about hiring people of different sexes into your team, but also hiring people of different mindsets into your team. And that's when I ensured that when the new client was given to me, I said, I want to have more male thinkers as well into this team. So we actually, within a span of 1 year, with a team of around 9 women, managed to get 3 more boys into the team. And I say that with a lot of pride that we were able to not create a 50-50 ratio, but at least a 35-40%. And I must say, the chemistry of having male and female colleagues within a team created immense magic for my clients.
Brilliant. And that's a wonderful example to share. I think even at the ground level, if a gender ratio can be achieved or a certain diversity can be achieved for different voices, the thinking would change immensely for clients or the team as well as the industry as a whole.
True, absolutely true. And like I said, Tarun, I think there is a lot of work to be done at the ground level. There may be opportunities lying at very senior levels, but when you go deep down at the grassroots level where the real hiring happens, I think that's where it's important for us to make that change.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question, Preeti. What can an organization do to make sure that the workforce is more inclusive and diverse? You were one of the champions, who actually got a diversity mandate done for your team. But is there any advice that you can share with organizations, helping them understand how they can do that from day one?
Absolutely, Tarun. And this is, like I said, right, part of my learning journey as well, right? And I realized one thing: diversity and inclusion starts at the most important pillar in an organization. And I'll go back to say it is our HR workforce. It goes back to those hirings that we look at. Let's break the monotony of ensuring that as organizations, we will only hire from these fields. We will not look at talent from anywhere else. When we are hiring for roles, we will move beyond the typical cliches of saying that a sales workforce needs to have a man. A sales workforce can have women. And trust you me, I know women today who've had some fantastic careers in sales. I know of women today who have some fantastic journeys to tell in careers which were dominantly looked upon as male careers, but are thriving in that industry. So I think that change needs to happen from that exact point where at the ground level we say we will break the cliches of saying who we want hired in terms of either the sex of the individual, whether it's a male or a female, or even going back to saying where we will hire. So the who and the where definitely need to be changed. And that's where the grassroots level change will start to occur.
Absolutely, and that's very, very valid advice. But diversity and inclusion is often used as a PR talk point. How, in your opinion, so I want to ask this to you, right? How, in your opinion, does PR play a role in championing this cause for an organization? Does it make an impact?
It absolutely does make an impact. And I would say if an organization is championing the cause of diversity and inclusion and is unable to share their voice to the external world, to learn from, to actually see what they've achieved, I think there's a big, huge vacuum there. And that's where, right, PR professionals who are actually called storytellers are absolutely important, because when you're able to narrate the story of change, inspire people, you will obviously be able to create that change. And hence, for me, I've always believed that the story of diversity and inclusion has to be laid as a foundation stone in every PR story that any organization possibly wants to tell. When you're trying to build, I think, corporate reputations, if you do not have a very strong story of your workforce, you will possibly have a big, huge vacuum there, Tarun. The reason I say is because those employees that are working with you are today, at the end of it, very important stakeholders for you, are the one that are also championing your story externally. So if you're not able to build a diverse workforce, there will definitely not be a great story to tell externally. And I think that's where it's very critical and important for us to have the storytellers who will really carve out those stories and bring them to life externally.
Absolutely. So, how is it at the organization that you are right now?
Oh, it's phenomenal. And with the organization that I am in right now, which is Kimberly-Clark, I think we've really elevated the diversity and inclusion. We're really growing, evolving, learning. And the reason I say that is because at Kimberly-Clark, we have just set up an inclusion and diversity group. We never had that in India, but we did think that it's important to be able to ensure that in a growing organization, you're also able to create that cohesive environment. You're able to create an environment where employees can thrive, where women can really take up a lot of leadership roles. In fact, we've created a lot of employee resource groups which help employees thrive on this. And not to forget, I'd really like to bring this out. On our India Leadership Board, we have a 45% diversity across our leaders, where we have almost 4 women leaders on an actual table of around 9 leaders in the India leadership team. So I think that's a great move and a great shift to showcase that we have diverse thinking. And at the same time, we are ensuring that women leaders are really able to thrive and come to leadership roles.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Very well done.
Thank you.
So I do hope that a lot of organizations who are listening to this podcast can take inspiration from Kimberly Clark and from you to be able to do this in their organizations as well. So we're running out of time. Here are my last three questions that I'd like to address to you. Your life advice for PR professionals to champion the cause as an individual.
If we're talking about diversity and inclusion as a cause, I would say very clearly to all my PR professionals, whether in senior leadership roles, in mid management roles, or even for startups, right? Be aspirational, keep growing. At the same time, ensure that you're nurturing your colleagues that you're working with. As a startup to the PR industry, I think what an individual brings with him or her can possibly use them as learnings, can actually build those skill sets for the colleague to learn from. At mid levels, ensure that you're mentoring your juniors. At leadership roles, ensure that we are able to elevate that talent and bring them to the forefront so that they get those opportunities to thrive. Because if, as leaders, we are really not able to create a cohesive workforce and not able to bring our young talent to the forefront, I think we will have a backlash when it comes to our personal goals. And that's something that I have worked around with Tarun in my life to ensure that I'm able to build and nurture talent, because that then very clearly resonates with my growth as well.
Brilliant. And that's a very interesting way to look at it. And I do hope a lot of people do understand that, because when we talk about the power of one, it's not just about nurturing the colleague, the peer, or the junior that is working with you, because what you give out today is going to come back to you, because that is going to be the stepping stone for your success as well as an individual.
Absolutely. And that's the reason I said, Tarun, that, it's not only the onus of the leaders or of the mid management, it's also the onus that every individual takes up when he starts his or her career in PR, right? Because you're learning and evolving. At the same time, if you're not able to share that knowledge with your peers, I think somewhere you're doing injustice also to your own growth.
Absolutely. And that's how, honestly, PRPOI came into existence. The intention is to learn, share, and upskill together. It's a safe space for everybody to learn together. So, what would be your advice for crafting a successful career in PR? What would you like to tell all the members and listeners of PRPOI?
Tarun, for me, I think, like I said earlier, right, I come from a career of around 22 years where I learned the traditional forms of PR and saw PR evolving over the years. My only advice to all PR professionals would be we have new ways of communication. We talk of the entire evolution that is happening in PR, but don't lose focus of your most important grounded traditional ways that are most important and nascent in public relations, right? Following ones, do not lose focus of the touch and feel of knowing your media, because no matter how much people say today, we've evolved digitally, we've moved digitally, I think we still stay grounded with our media relations. And today in this digital world, that's the biggest challenge that we foresee, right? And if we take away that, I think there'll be a huge concern area for a lot of PR professionals. But having said that, I would say just three important things. Remain focused to your goal. Do not forget the basics in PR. Those are something that you really need to harness and take along with you, not just leave back. And the third and the most important thing, while you're doing the first two, never lose the interest in learning. I think a diverse learning experience will possibly make a great leader, because at the end of it, you don't become just a specialist, you become a diverse specialist.
That's a brilliant way of putting this. Thank you so much. Last two questions. One statement that you live your life by.
Never lose hope.
Awesome. So, this I have to ask, what has been your experience on PRPOI?
So, Tarun, and I say this with all honesty,
Yeah.
in my past 2 decades, I've always been a very shy PR person, never really participated so strongly on industry forums or ever been a part of them. But like I said, right, the evolution has taught a lot to even traditional PR folks like me. You and me are on a lot of multiple common platforms. But what I see from PRPOI is that whole need gap getting fulfilled, right? And I think a lot of work that you and your team has been putting forward on PRPOI in ensuring that there are more mentoring sessions through your podcast happening. I don't know whether you realize, but while I speak to a lot of folks in the PR industry, some of them who are avid listeners of your podcast come back to me with every new nuance, whether it be a conversation on sustainability, whether it be a conversation on evolving around PR, there is always a learning nuance that they're bringing. And hence, I would say that please keep up the good work, because you unknowingly are actually mentoring a huge bunch of PR industry workforce over there. So I think that's a very important aspect that you're covering, which currently we see evolving and growing within the industry.
Thank you so much. I mean, this will be very, very encouraging for all of us. We'll continue to do this as we grow.
That'd be fantastic. Please keep the good work going, Tarun.
So, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Really, really enjoyed my conversation with you, the official and the unofficial one.
Thank you, Tarun. It was a pleasure, and it always is a pleasure speaking with you. And like you said, the official and the unofficial one, we can go on for hours together. 24 hours will seem like a very short time for a day, but absolute pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So that was Preeti Binoy speaking to us about how we can create a more inclusive and diverse industry. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. A big shout out to the good folks at PRPOI for collaborating with us on this episode. We will see you next time with another engaging conversation from the world of PR and communication.